My name's Chloe and I have read over 250 books. Last week I tackled Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy and it was heavy in both senses of the word. So this week I needed something to lighten things up. I decided to read only beach reads. And what better place to read beach reads than literally on the beach. Even though it's technically winter, I'm lucky to live in a place that is warm enough most of the year. And although we've had a lot of rain and cooler weather lately, I did get a few days of sunshine in this week and was able to read the Rom-Commers by Katherine on the beach, which was the perfect setting for this book. So this week we're chatting about some of my favourite beach reads. First up, we have One Golden Summer by Carley. Now, confession time, I had not read a Carley book until this one, and I only read this within the last month. I picked it up for free at a hotel in Thailand, and I'd been meaning to read it, and it just felt meant to be. It was sitting right there on the top. It felt like a real win to get this book, and then I ended up devouring it on my trip, and it was the perfect book to read while on vacation. So it feels very beachy. The setting is Barry's Bay, which is in Canada, and I believe it's near-ish Toronto or a drive from Toronto. I don't really know the area, but it certainly looks beautiful. Now, something that I didn't know is that Carley Fortune's books are connected, even though her books focus on different characters. The characters do link up. So every summer after has some of the same characters that are in this book. So One Golden Summer focuses on Charlie Florek, but his brother is represented in Every Summer After, and that's a love story between him and Percy, and those characters feature in this book. So if you read this one first, you kind of ruin it for yourself, and there is quite a big spoiler in this book that relates to the first book. Now, I haven't read the first book, but I did see the Amazon series, so I kind of read this book and then watched the series, so it was a little bit out of order. So if I had my time over, I would have read Every Summer After first and then read this book. All that to say, One Golden Summer is so well written. It was giving me serious Judy Blume vibes. I felt like I was going back to middle school age when I would devour Judy Blume. I absolutely loved her. I read every single one of her books, and for whatever reason, I feel a connection. It was kind of like Summer Sisters, which is Judy Blume's adult novel. I was just getting a feeling, even though I don't really remember the content of the books, the feeling was so similar. I love that they're in a small town. It's the summer romance feeling, and the main character, Charlie Florek, doesn't feel like he is a character that our female protagonist should fall for. He just feels like the kind of guy that she shouldn't go for. However, over the summer, they have this kind of bucket list that they're working through, and they spend a lot of time together. So I suppose it's like a friends to lovers situation. It's also a second chance romance because they have previously crossed paths when they have been in Barry's Bay at the same time. And it all revolves around this photograph that Alice, our protagonist, took years and years ago of Charlie and his brother and his girlfriend. And so she's getting to meet the person in this photograph that she took years ago. And so that's the second chance element of it. I love that Alice was a photographer because we really go into her creative mind. I also think it's not a profession that is normally represented in books. I don't think I've read a lot of books about photographers and how a photographer thinks, because oftentimes she's just enjoying a moment and a scene in life. She doesn't even have her camera, but she thinks about how that scene could become a photograph, how she's almost taking moments from life and memorizing them as if they're photographs. So it's really interesting to see the world through a photographer's eyes and through her eyes in this book. And I really liked the coming of age in the story because it's as much about Alice's journey and her finding her voice and her confidence and deciding what type of photographer she wants to be throughout the book as it is a love story. And I love when there's both. I don't always just love when it's just a straight romance. I love when the character is also going on a journey, and Alice in this book very much is. Overall, it's feel-good vibes. It's an easy read. I plowed through it in, a few days. And I will absolutely read other Carley Fortune books. I don't know if I will read Every Summer After because I just feel I know the content of that so well. Not just because I watched the show, that wasn't what put me off, but just because there is a major spoiler in this book. So my advice is to definitely read them in the other order, but I know that Carley has lots of other books, so I will definitely be reading those. I think she's an excellent writer. It felt very realistic. I felt as though I was in the scenes. Her ability to write setting is very good. She obviously loves this place, Barry's Bay, so she's really been able to bring it to life vividly. And so it feels very realistic and accurate. And even though I've never been there, I feel as though I know the place, which shows that she's a very talented writer, that she can just throw you into the scene and it feels like you're literally there. So highly recommend One Golden Summer, and that is my first beach read. Second beach read on the list is Emily Henry's Great Big Beautiful Life. Now this is her latest book. I read it, must have been earlier this year if I recall correctly, or was it late last year? I can't remember. Now, I really enjoyed this book. I love that Emily Henry often writes about writers or people in the writing profession. I love that aspect. And so this book is about two writers who go to this place called, I just forget what it's called, Little Crescent Island, where this wealthy heiress has been kind of hiding out. So she's a very famous person, but she's become reclusive, and she has finally decided to have somebody write her memoir for her. So it's an amazing opportunity and job. However, there are two writers vying for the job, and she is kind of making them pitch themselves and compete for the job. And so our two writers are called Alice. We have another Alice in this book, and Hayden. So the story really is about Alice and Hayden, but it's also about Margaret Ives, who is the wealthy heiress. One thing that I didn't like as much about, and I will say I really did enjoy this book, but one thing I didn't like as much is that we learned a lot about Margaret Ives, and I don't know that I needed that much information about her. I wasn't as curious about her story. I wanted to know a lot more about Alice and Hayden and their stories, which we do learn about. But I just felt like when we would get to Margaret's sections and we were learning a lot about her life and all of the drama that had happened, I didn't feel as connected to that character, and I don't know why. Another problem with this book is that completely by coincidence, the book that I read right before Great Big Beautiful Life was this one, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And if you've read this one, you know that it is a masterpiece. It is a book that I could not put down. And it was just a complete coincidence that I read this literally as the book before Great Big Beautiful Life. And I had no idea that people online had called out similarities between the two books. So it wasn't until I was reading Great Big Beautiful Life that I looked it up online to see, have other people noticed these similarities, and realized, yes, they have. Now, do I think that this is in any way copying The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo? No, not at all. They're two completely different stories, but they have so many similarities. And look, basically every story has already been told. It's so normal for stories to sound really similar. It's just that when you read them back to back, and because one is so viral, so well known, so loved, and really was perfectly written, it did throw me off a little bit. Now, this one is not a romance. It's certainly a love story, or many love stories, whereas this one is a romance. So they're two totally different books, and there are plenty of differentiating factors between the two books, but I couldn't help but get a little bit thrown by that just because they are so similar. And in Evelyn Hugo's story, the protagonist, I feel, is Evelyn Hugo, although there is a writer learning about her story and we learn about the writer's life as well. We're really focused on Evelyn Hugo. Whereas in this one, I don't think that Margaret Ives is the protagonist. I think it's Alice, surely. We're in her head. So because of that, I felt like I was just learning way too much about Margaret, and those parts of the book became kind of boring to me. And I did get a little bit frustrated with Margaret as a character generally, because she was making Hayden and Alice kind of compete for this job. Found that a little bit irritating. Now, that is the entire plot of the book, and there wouldn't be any tension if they weren't competing for the job, but still, I found that frustrating. But let's talk about what I did like. I liked the tension between Alice and Hayden. I liked that Hayden was a kind of acts of service guy. That made it kind of cute and fun. I like that there's a scene where a big hurricane is coming in, and that creates romantic moments. I found both Alice and Hayden to be likable characters overall, which is really nice. There's also a subplot of Alice healing her relationship with her mum to a certain extent. And I really liked that journey because, again, that's not necessarily something that would be covered in a romance book. I love that Emily Henry doesn't just do romance. She does a lot of things around that. And I'm sure a lot of people really loved learning about Margaret Ives and her story. But I love that she doesn't just do straight romance. There's always a coming of age with it. And it's the same reason I enjoyed the Carley Fortune book is the reason that I enjoyed this beach read. And there are scenes that occur on the beach, so it is definitely a beach read. Like all Emily Henry books, it's absolutely worth your time. Beautifully written, great dialogue, good tension, and you just feel happy reading a book like this. I just don't think you can go wrong with an Emily Henry. And finally, my favorite of the three is the Rom-Commers. This one I was reading this week, and although we didn't have a ton of beach weather, it is winter here, and it's been quite a rainy, grey winter I've found, but we do live in a relatively mild climate, and there was some time that was beachy enough to go and chill on the beach. I did do an ocean dip. It was a little bit chilly, but this was the perfect book to read on the beach. I think I'm a very new fan of Katherine Center. I read her book, The Bodyguard, and although I really liked it, I don't know if I liked it as much as everybody else did. For whatever reason, I don't know if I just could believe it. Something that threw me off in The Bodyguard was the fact that the main character, whose name I cannot remember, in fact, I cannot remember either the male or female leads in that one, but the male lead critiqued the female lead's appearance on a number of times. And for me, even if that happens earlier in the book and it's an enemies to lovers situation, I just don't think critiquing appearance should ever be acceptable. And it happened too many times that I just couldn't get behind the male lead. Whereas this one, but don't get me wrong, The Bodyguard was beautifully written and it was a really fun story and I loved it at first. I just couldn't fully get behind that one. However, the Rom-Commers I loved from the beginning and it was just the perfect. I mean, I agree with Emily Henry. She's written here on the front, my perfect 10 of a book. Could not agree more. I've become such a big fan of Katherine Center, and something that I didn't realize is the book Happiness for Beginners, which is an adaptation on Netflix, and I love that movie. The book was written by Katherine Center, so now I'm desperate to read the book version because I love that movie. I thought that was perfect, and I loved this book. So this book is about Emma and Charlie, and they are both screenwriters. Charlie is a really famous screenwriter. He's won awards and he's very well known in the industry, but he has never written a rom-com before. And Emma writes rom-coms, but she's a struggling screenwriter, and she's been looking after her dad, who was in this really serious accident, which actually killed her mother. And she's been looking after him for the last decade. And now is finally her chance to work on this huge project with Charlie, who is this famous screenwriter who she really respects and admires. However, Charlie is not somebody who believes in love. He's had heartbreak before, and his mother also left their family, so he struggles with the aspect of love, and he doesn't like rom-coms. So basically, it's kind of an opposites attract, a little bit of an enemies to lovers, I suppose, situation where our main character, Emma, moves out to LA. She is staying at Charlie's house and they are writing this rom-com together. And as I said before, I love reading books written about writers. I think it is such a great topic. And the fact that they're writing a rom-com, and this is obviously a rom-com, and it's just perfect. It's cheesy in the best possible way. I think Katherine Center does such a great job of setting up scenes where the characters can be really romantic and it can be really fun. And it's cheesy without being predictable or cliche. She's also a really comedic writer. She's really fun. I actually have laughed out loud a number of times while reading this book, whereas I find I don't necessarily laugh out loud at books, even if they're meant to be funny. It's a struggle for me sometimes to laugh based just solely through a book. And Katherine Center does such a good job of actually making me laugh, so I'm sure other people feel the same way. And Taylor Jenkins Reid has actually written on this one, serious Nora Ephron vibes, and I fully agree. I agree with Emily Henry. I thought this was a perfect 10 of a book. I thought it was so beautifully written. It's so fun. I would read it again. I'm desperate to read everything by Katherine Center now. And I feel this one is not as popular or known as The Bodyguard, which surprises me because this is certainly my favorite of the two, but I'm really excited to see how I fare with her other books. So those are some of my favorite beach reads. I feel like there are so many other books that I could talk about, but those are the ones that I wanted to focus on today. And I'm so glad that after working my way through Anna Karenina that I could reward myself with something light this week and get all the positive light vibes. I was also reading Into the Blue this week, but I'm going to talk about that in another video. But I've had a fun week of reading about writers writing comedy and having laughs, which was very needed after last week. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.